So my name is Ajay. I'm a research assistant professor in the Department of Neurology at Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine. And just a little bit about my background. I have an undergraduate degree in electrical and computer engineering from UIUC. I then worked in aerospace for a couple of years doing electrical design and project management before going back and completing my master's and PhD in bioengineering at UIC. Subsequently, I did postdoc at UPMC in neurology and radiology, and a second postdoc at the Parkinson Center at Northwestern University. And for the last few years, I've been a research assistant professor and recently started my laboratory. And so the Kurani AI and neuroimaging laboratory, we focus in three main areas. One is advanced neuroimaging research in neurodegenerative disorders such as Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. So the goal is to develop non-invasive imaging-based biomarkers to classify disease and track disease progression. The secondary research we're involved in is combining AI and medical imaging. And so I'm part of the Institute for Augmented Intelligence in Medicine at Northwestern University and in the AI and medical imaging group. And so our goal is to develop novel advanced AI or deep learning algorithms to classify patients, track disease progression, and get really towards subject level insights and getting more towards personalized medicine. And so the way our third goal in our lab is in order to accomplish this, we need a robust infrastructure and storage and processing system. And so I'm co-director of the Northwestern University Research Image Processing System, or NeurIPS, that's building a web-based platform that researchers can use to store, curate, process data, and access data from around the world in a secure fashion.
Great. All right, tell me about your role in the design review process for the class program and a brief background about your case study.
Sure. So this ties into the research I just laid out. One of my colleagues was actually in the class program and he's part of the team implementing NeurIPS with me. And so we pitched NeurIPS as a possible case study. And so it worked out very well. One of the needs we have is for a hybrid scalable architecture that can utilize our on-prem resources, such as our petabyte storage and compute cluster, but adding cloud bursting capabilities in order to minimize processing time for these large data sets, some of which are in the tens of thousands. So this really gave us a good platform for evaluating this design as we're going to be building it out over this upcoming year.
How did the architectural review help inform your case study?
So I think it helped inform our case study in a few ways. One was the review really helped us to identify the best way to integrate our current design platform with cloud computing, and that would maximize the use of our current technology stack in order to minimize our overhead and support while achieving our goals. It also gives an opportunity to evaluate all three cloud vendor proposals and see which was most in line with our overall goals from a support level, which one was the most stable for the next 5 to 10 years. So on the research side, it's because everything's grant funded, it's harder to pivot quickly. And so I think that this really gave us a good way to see all three and how we could utilize this in the future.
Did you end up taking the suggestions from the cloud vendors?
Yeah, so we from this experience, I think we've narrowed down which vendor and which architecture design would be part of our phase 2 rollout of the NeurIPS system. So it was, yeah, a great experience.
And did that work out with, thinking forward to the grant funding?
Yeah, I think so, because unlike, working at a company where it's just maybe a constant stream of funding, our nature is we're dealing with several researchers that have grants that go on and off, and some are allocated towards hardware resources. So I think being able to evaluate which one would have the best model for cloud bursting really works well with this kind of grant environment where the funding is not always consistent and it may come from one particular PI and then switch to another person, so it's kind of harder to plan out. And this flexibility in design really, I think, meshes well with our overall goals.
That's good to hear. What did you find beneficial in having your use case be part of class?
So one of the greatest things was I think we really got to see the different viewpoints from different researchers at other institutions. So some may have implemented something similar or had lessons learned of things they tried that didn't work. I think there was also questions that were brought up that we may not have thought to ask. And additionally, I think just the understanding the cost structure and how to actually implement this was the biggest benefit, because when you're trying to convert how every research has always been done, I think there are a lot of unknowns and risks. And so I think that having this this very detailed case review with cost structure breakouts give us an idea of how we can actually pay for this, as well as how do we actually, from the technology side, implement it with our current architecture.
Great. Well, you sort of answered this, but how do you think researchers like yourself could leverage class for learning to utilize the cloud for their research?
Yeah, so I think one, it gets researchers up to speed not only on the lingo and terminology, but seeing what's out there. So I think because our work is primarily focused in other areas and not necessarily on the cloud side, the technology has changed a lot over the past few years. So I think one, just getting up to speed with what's currently out there. The other thing is this helps us to leverage hybrid environments or being able to roll out your system on the cloud completely. So I think from our point of view, a lot of major institutions that have a lot of institutional hardware already there, the hybrid approach is a good way of leveraging in-house and outside resources. But for smaller labs that don't necessarily have the IT support, moving to the cloud where you don't have to deal with all that overhead is another good solution that was presented. And then finally, I think it also connects us to other institutions and people that we can use past the class coursework for when we run into any of these like implementation issues, that we have some contacts that have gone through the same program and that can be a resource down the line.
Okay. Could you tell me a little bit about how you utilize this knowledge while you're working in a hybrid environment with Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine?
Yeah, so one of the things was we were interested in figuring out how we can actually get data transferred over to the cloud. Is it better to have data sitting over on a hard drive space in the cloud versus transferring data on the fly? And one of the concerns for us is always with HIPAA compliance and data security. So figuring out what is the optimal path to always ensure that the data is secure and we're working in a HIPAA compliant environment while still achieving our goals and minimizing the overall costs. I think that was very helpful.
Great. What else would you add for anyone thinking about joining class?
I think it's a great experience, especially I think the case study, from my perspective as a case study presenter, I think this really accelerated my own research and got me thinking of other options I would not have probably come up on my own. And I think it shortened up the time scale of what we're looking to do by several months. Also, I think the other thing is also the more engaged you are in the process and the more questions you ask, I think the more everyone in the program gets out of it. And I think that, likely if you're thinking of a question in your head that you think is too basic, probably 9 times out of 10, there's half the class is saying the same thing. So the more engaged you are with the process, I think the more you'll get out of it.